Tony, you just reminded me to turn on Do Not Disturb as I give a presentation. That is really good advice for presentations, except in one situation, which is I was working with somebody who had a consumer app and they're getting a bunch of downloads. And so I told her to set it up so that she would get an alert every time a new person downloaded the app.
Hmm.
And then to apologize about the 10th time there was a ping during the meeting. And then say, sorry, we set up this thing that automatically notifies us every time somebody downloads the app. You
Smart.
got to manufacture that excitement.
Yes, it depends on the context of the presentation. So for ours,
Yeah,
we wanted to make
absolutely.
sure that people pay attention because you've got a lot of great things to share. With that said, let's get started. All right, we're kicking off this year with our growth series of webinars on the topic of pitch decks that raise money. And I'll introduce our friend and guest speaker, Matt, in a second. But before we do that, let's cover a few housekeeping items just to get that out of the way, and we'll get started. First question, this is a preemptive because everyone asks this question in every single webinar on the face of the planet, which is, are we recording this and will we make the recording available? The answer is yes. We primarily, or for most of our sessions, we do make it available to the public. On very few occasions, we have private sessions just for our founders and our portfolio. But this one indeed is being recorded, and after a few days' time, will be available on our blog, ungated. You don't have to fill out a form again. Just make sure that you're subscribed to receive the updates whenever it comes out if you want to get notified. Secondly, definitely feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation. We may not address it at that particular time, but we'll do our best to address it at some point. If you can find and navigate to the question and answer in the or box in the Zoom UI, just enter in your questions there. Not in the chat because that chat gets a little bit noisy over time. So definitely we welcome your questions throughout. All right. Okay. Now with that out of the way, I'm really happy to bring Matt back to our series. If you guys have been with us for a few years now, I believe, Matt, you did a similar presentation with us about a year and a half or 2 years ago, if I recall correctly, on a similar topic. But obviously, this is a very important topic, especially for many of our portcos who are thinking about their next milestone and raising another round of funding. And I'm sure many of you who are not part of our portfolio are here to learn the exact same thing. Really pleased to invite Matt back. Matt is the founder of a presentation agency, or you'll probably do a better job describing
That's great.
your company in more detail. But yeah, Matt's an expert in what he does. And I'll say this, we rarely invite speakers back for multiple presentations, mostly because we've covered similar topics before. But Matt's one of the few that we wanted to bring back on this session. So, Matt, super happy to have you. I'll hand the floor over to you and take it away.
Great. Guys, first thing I'll offer right off the bat is that me and my team want to be super helpful to you with your pitch deck. So I'm going to go through and give some really great principles on how to win. But you're also invited to just email me your pitch deck, and me or somebody on my team will give you personalized feedback in the next couple days. So you can see my email is there. It's matt@optio.io. It's a randomly capitalized I there, but matt@optio.io. So go ahead and send me your deck, and me and my team will give you free feedback whenever you want it. Okay. So would be
Amazing.
happy to help you guys.
Great.
So what are we going to do today? We're going to talk about how to make pitch decks that raise money by looking at before and afters of bad slides that we turned into great slides. Now, the first question you should be asking is, why should I pay attention to this guy? And you should be paying attention to me on this specific area, and maybe this area alone, because I've helped founders raise more than $3 billion from top firms like A16Z and Founders Fund and ABC and all those guys. How did I get into this very strange line of work? I got into this because I originally was a consultant at Boston Consulting Group, forgive me. Then I worked at a venture studio called Saturn V, where I helped build early stage ventures and helped actually raise money for startups. And really, the combination of my love of startups and my love of PowerPoint is Optio. And Optio is this business. And all we do at Optio is help founders make great pitch decks so they can really tell their story and raise money from the right people. And the thing is that most pitch decks are terrible. One of my VC friends told me once, if I see another bad pitch deck, I am going to scream. I think he was lying because he sees about 20 bad pitch decks a day, the poor guy. And so what we're going to do is play a game of Extreme Makeover Slide Edition. We're going to take some slides from terrible to beautiful, looking at 6 core areas, 6 of the most important slides in your deck. The problem, the solution, product or how it works, traction, why now, and team. So talk about each of those with one example from before and after for each. And then after going through that, I'll highlight some principles for that slide and that work a little bit more universally. So first, let's talk about problem slides. The purpose of a problem slide is really simple. It's to help investors feel the pain. If the pain doesn't feel obvious and extreme, then you're probably not framing it up right. This is a very bad problem slide. This is the original 2008 cab problem slide. Now, it took me a while to figure out that this was even the problem slide because that deck is a mess. I feel very comfortable making fun of billionaires. So I can tell Travis that he really did poorly here. But cabs in 2008, let's read this. Most use aging and inefficient technology, radio dispatch, no two-way communication. Most common car, Crown Ford Victoria, 14 miles per gallon. Hailing is done by hand or phone. I'm already getting bored. I don't know about y'all. We have a picture on here. I like pictures, but the picture is decoration, not communication. Doesn't tell us anything about what cabs are. It's just a little pasted on there. It's nonsense. We're also using bullet points. I have a personal jihad against bullet points. If you're using a bunch of bullet points, you probably don't know what you're actually trying to say. And then let's look at all the different topics we have here. We're talking 14 miles per gallon. Is that good or bad? I don't know. Radio dispatch, good or bad? I don't know. Dead time. That seems bad, right? But it's vague. There's no headline. Let me show you how I rebuilt this slide. The problem is that cabs suck. There's no two-way communication. They're gross. They're bad for the environment. There's lots of dead time, and there's lots of dead time. And apparently my camera died. Wonderful. There's lots of dead time. Now, that's actually more information than we had on the previous slide, okay? Let's look at the previous slide. We got all those points in, but you know what we also did? We also added gross because I think cabs are gross. So this way is a much simpler, cleaner message, but at the same time, it's instantly recognizable. Now, I also used a photo here, but the photo I used has a kind of unhappy, chunky man looking vaguely distressed and disgusted as he gets in the car. That is a picture that underlies, that's reinforcing the words that my argument itself. The other thing that's really important about this here, as we go and look at both sides at the same time, is that the original slide talks about how it just says the topic, cabs in 2008. A topic is not an argument. And actually, every single slide you make should have an argument, a thesis statement, the one thing that you want them to believe. So I really think about every slide in 2 components, right? Or really 3 parts. First, there's the signpost, the problem, the solution, the team. That tells the ADD venture capitalist who's not paying that much attention where they are in the presentation. Okay, that's one. Then you have the thesis statement, the headline, or the argument you're trying to make. Cabs suck. You'll notice that Uber has none of those 2 things. It has a topic, but it doesn't really tell you what the signpost is, and it doesn't have an argument. Now, the rest of it is just the reason to believe the evidence for your claim. Why do cabs suck? Cabs suck because there's no two-way communication, they're gross, etc., etc. So that is how you build a much better problem slide. Let's derive a few takeaways from this. First, lead with the pain. There should be a painful problem that you know exactly who's hurting and why they're hurting. Second, say what you actually mean. Don't say cabs in 2008, say cabs suck. Figure out what the argument is you're trying to make and make that argument. Now, this is the last piece, and this leads really nicely into solution. Only talk about problems you can actually solve. So one of the problems that Uber identified is that Crown Victorias get 14 miles per gallon. A lot of Ubers at that time also got roughly the same gas mileage. So he made an argument about the environment that he actually could not solve. It's a red herring. Talk about the problems you can actually solve, not about all the possible problems in the space. Okay? So get narrow on the problem, and the solution should very tightly match each other. Okay? So we talked about the problem. Now let's talk about the solution and how to get that solution to really come across in a very clean way. This is a real client slide. I redacted it and changed it so they wouldn't recognize it themselves. But this was a company that made rocket engines. They've now raised a ton of money and are flying real rockets, which is super fun. I helped them really early and have been helping them over the years since then. But again, they have a photo. The photo is illustration, is decoration, not communication. Doesn't really help move the ball forward. It does have the signpost. It says that this is a solution slide. That's good. But why is that the biggest font on the slide? That's not a big deal. I just want to know it's the solution slide. That's not the thing that should take the most of my attention. Then they do not have an argument here. You actually have to read a dense paragraph to understand what they're trying to say. And the paragraph more or less says that we think the fuel efficiency, it'll have a 5% total fuel efficiency gain. That's nice. Okay. 5% seems nice. But is that actually worth money? I don't know because I don't know much about rockets. You have to assume that even your sophisticated venture capitalists don't know very much about your space. It has to be accessible to them instantly while also being plausible to the experts. Here's how I rebuilt this slide. Our solution is that we can 5x every rocket's payload. Our greater fuel efficiency means that you can reduce the amount of gas at takeoff and therefore 5x the actual payload. Now, it took me a long time to discover this because my client was very technical. He had a PhD. He was literally a rocket scientist. And he instantly knew that a 5% reduction in, or a 5% improvement in efficiency, because 99.9% of the weight of a rocket at takeoff is gas, he knew that 5% was equivalent to 5x. But he was talking about the intermediate, nerdy efficiency point rather than the outcome, the thing that actually matters, the thing that's actually worth dollars. No one will pay you for an increase in efficiency. People will pay you for an increase in payload. And so you have to understand, even though it's magical to you, is it clear that is magical to your user? Is that clear that's magical to your audience? And you have to be very careful and think deeply about that to make sure you're getting that point across. And so here we went from 5% to 5x. Of course, there's lots of other things going on with the slide that make it work better, but let's just talk about a few of them. The first one is talk about benefits, not features. No one cares about your features. I once had a venture capitalist tell me, I won't quite swear as violently as he did, but he said, no one cares about your effing technology. What he meant by that is no one cares what your features are, how it actually works under the hood. I want to know that, but I only want to know that after I know you can produce a magical outcome. Lead with the magical benefit, not the feature. Second, it's what you do, not how you do it. We get to the how a little bit later. Oftentimes, people try to cram in the benefits and the features on one slide or a deep explanation of the technical elements before you've even sold me that this is worth understanding. First, show the benefits, show the what, and then you can get to the features and the how. And that third point, make it sexy. If this thing shouldn't, like, this is the solution slide should be the pinnacle, it should blow their socks off. If it isn't the sexiest slide in the deck, you're probably leaving money on the table. Okay, next let's talk about product or how it actually works. The key idea with this slide is that you want to let investors feel smart. What you don't need to do is make sure that investors actually understand it. There's a key distinction. Investors want to feel like they get it. They don't need to actually get it. And one thing I like to think about is this is what a lot of my technical investors look like when they're trying to explain something to a VC. If you have a PhD, if you're an engineer, if you're a true world expert in this space, it's very easy for you to start looking unhinged really early, okay? So instead I want you to really focus on telling a very simple story. What I like to say is do not go PhD dissertation like this slide. Instead, I want you to go with a Miss Frizzle level explanation of the science or a simple high level overview of the science. So this is a slide I got from a client, again, modified for their privacy, and I switched disease too. But this is the kind of slide that my wife's a doctor. She does a bunch of research. She goes to a bunch of conferences all over the world and presents her findings. I am banned for the health of our marriage from ever looking at my wife's PowerPoint slides because my wife's PowerPoint slides look like this. This is what PhDs and engineers want to do because you know a lot of things. You want to tell people these amazing things you know. You want to tell people about the amazing things you've done. But the problem with this is that no one is ever going to get through it. In the history of the world, no venture capitalist has ever read the seventh bullet point. It has never happened. And so what you need to do is think about how to boil your message down to the really key idea and speak in a language that an intelligent 12-year-old would understand. Okay, so let me show you how I rebuilt this slide, this how it works slide. We trigger new neural connections at the push of a button. Proprietary software creates new neural connections with any device on the market. 1, we collect brain data through the vagus nerve. 2, our algorithm develops a personalized treatment plan. 3, the device stimulates brain activity. I broke it down into 3 radically oversimplified steps using relatively short and small words. And then I gave them a picture because people like pictures. People like pictures. Now, if I look at this, do you actually understand how this works? No, you don't. If you actually spent the time to carefully read the longer version, you would probably have a much better sense of how it actually works if you're also a PhD expert in the field. But what we did is gave them a plot, a story that they can remember and retell in their own head about, okay, so it does this and then this. That makes sense to me. I get it. I see the whole picture. Now, you still want the dense slides. If you're a very technical founder, then what I recommend you do is have a technical appendix. And that technical appendix is really valuable because at some point you are going to get into due diligence. And during due diligence, they're going to pull their own PhD out of the basement, their own engineer out of the basement, and have him look at your stuff and decide if it's legit or not. At that point, you want the really dense, boring slides. But the average venture capitalist spends less than 13 seconds on each slide. You can understand my slide in 13 seconds. There's no chance in hell you understand the original slide in 13 seconds. 13 seconds is almost no time at all. I've been making this point about 13 seconds for now about 16 seconds. You do not have much time to communicate ideas. Okay, so to summarize, what do we want to do here? First, we want to be Miss Frizzle, not a PhD dissertation. Miss Frizzle is, of course, from the Magic School Bus, the best science television show ever made. And in the Miss Frizzle telling of the universe, cells worked and they were quite simple and you could go inside them and understand it. Tell simple stories about your deep scientific and technical breakthroughs so that people believe they understand it. And then that gets you into the room so you can give them the more full, complex story and get into due diligence. Okay, Miss Frizzle, not PhD dissertation. Use pictures, not words. There's a reason that if you look at an advertisement in a magazine or if you look at an ad in your Instagram feed, it's a picture or a video. It's not a bunch of text because people respond to visuals much more strongly than they respond to language. If you are going to use words, keep them short, keep them punchy, and keep them as simple as you possibly can. Pictures are better than words. And then finally, you can always have a technical appendix. That's a great thing to have. You should have the technical underpinnings. You should have the real deal underneath it. And sometimes I even say asterisks at the bottom of a simple slide. For a clearer picture of how this exactly works, go to the technical appendix. Or if you have a PhD, ignore this and go to the technical appendix. And then everybody feels good about it. Okay, that is number 3. Now let's talk about number 4, traction. And this is the point where you show that it's working. There has to be some way to show that this thing is really taking off, that this thing is doing the magic that you promised earlier. So how can you do that? Don't do it this way. This is another slide that my wife would make and that I would be banned from. This is, again, a real slide from a client. There are 5 bullet points. That immediately breaks my heart. 5 bullet points is too many. Don't use bullet points if you can avoid it. Except on the team side, maybe, but don't use bullet points. So this is already too complicated. There is no argument that we're making, and we have some data on a very ugly Microsoft graph, but I don't know what the data is supposed to tell me. You should spoon feed the takeaways directly to the people. Don't let the venture capitalists think. Don't let them derive their own meaning from your slides and from your data. You should spoon feed it and make it extraordinarily clear precisely the thing that they should believe. And so here's how I rebuilt this slide. This is the most effective MS drug ever studied. I took the 5 bullet points, stripped out some nonsense, and turned it into 2 simple sentences with a nice picture. Our gold standard double-blind study of more than 2,000 adults over 9 months showed a dramatic improvement. And it was published in Science. Nice. There we go. We got a pretty picture in there. What happened too with this graph? Let's look. What's the difference between these graphs? A little fun with numbers. What I did is I started it at, instead of zero, I started it at 16. Okay, so I changed the y-axis so that I made it bigger. Also, sometimes I see people make a big fat graph along the bottom that's skinny. If you have a big skinny graph along the bottom, it doesn't look like it goes up very much. But if you make it half the slide, it looks like it goes up a lot. It's a really dumb thing. These are very smart people you're talking to, but those little things matter. You want to give the feeling of a hockey stick. You want to give the feeling of a big difference. So we changed where the break was in the slide. And then we also put the call out, 43% improvement over placebo group. That's beautiful. That's clear. I know exactly what's happening. This slide could never survive in 13 seconds. This slide you get in about 3 seconds, and you can read or not read everything down below as you see fit. Much better improvement. Okay, so then the takeaway box is here. And again, Miss Frizzle over PhD dissertation, picture over words, and you can always have a technical appendix. This is a great example of double checking to make sure that you don't duplicate a slide, because this is the wrong slide right here. But that tells you it's a good point and still remains true for this. Okay, let's talk about why now.
Hey, Matt, let me interject. There's a question
Please.
from the audience about traction. And by the way, not many questions have been coming in, mostly comments about how great of a presentation this has been.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
But the question is around this last section about traction. And Dania said, or asked, is asking, could you give some advice to present traction alternative slides for pre-seed, very early stage startups? I'll give my 2 cents in a second, but yeah, would love to hear what your suggestions are.
This is a very hard question. The short version of my answer is that you need to manufacture traction. Don't waste time working on a pitch deck if you don't have a lot of traction to prove that it's already working. Okay. So what does that mean? I know some guys who had a very complex medical device. The product was not ready yet. However, they ran a really good marketing campaign and they got 100,000 people on a wait list. That was enough for Andreessen to give them a check. They didn't have the product done, but they manufactured traction. For Airbnb, if you look at their original deck, their traction slide was like 4 of their friends saying, "This is pretty cool." That's really weak, but they had a slide that still felt like this is traction. Okay. They also showed something a little similar. This is on their market size, but they said, hey, here's 500,000 people doing couchsurfer.com. Okay. That's another way of showing user behavior. But my very short answer is manufacture traction any way you can. They only really got money after they did that crazy stunt where they mailed everybody Obama O's and Captain McCain's cereal and got some press about it during like the 2008 Democratic convention. Okay. Then some venture capitalists actually wrote them a check because they're like, if they're that crazy and they can manufacture, like if they can get attention doing something this stupid, I think these guys are going to go all the way. And so in other words, even if it's adjacent traction, manufacture some traction. That's my take. But Tony, maybe you have a better
Yeah.
argument.
No, I totally agree with your comment. Let me add a couple more things. Without going into the specifics around the stage or funding round that you're going after, because different rounds of funding, the investors at each of those stages are looking for different things. Okay. In this particular question, the audience is asking about for pre-seed. If you're, let's just say, applying for Mucker Lab, we have an accelerator program. And by definition of accelerators, it's geared for founders at the very beginning of your startup journey. A lot of our founders in our accelerator are still working on MVP, minimal viable product. So there's no traction in the sense of a high amount of recurring revenue or enterprise contracts because they're just getting started. But one way that, or some of the things that we look for example, are you alluded to this on your last slide, Matt. If you could go back to that chart, right? It's
Yeah.
value delivery, or the whole idea is it's working. So instead of showing that you've got revenue moving up to the right, talk about a result of the value that you're providing or the problem that you're solving for, maybe for or one or two design partners, right? Design partners being early alpha users or clients who you said, hey, why don't you test out our product? You could even provide it for free, right? Like at that stage, we just want to know that you're able to solve for a problem that you have hypothesized that is existing in the market today, right? And so, yeah, so be able to showcase stuff like this. We have early stage founders who are still trying to figure out pricing and how to monetize for consumer products. They've got active users. So show us how many active users you're getting on a daily, monthly, weekly basis, right? Your DAO, WOW, MAU, those acronyms, right? Show actual usage, be able to tell a story from the bottoms up. This kind of ties into, I don't want to go into a tangent here, but a lot of people talk about the TAM, right? Total addressable market. And sometimes people have a TAM slide. My personal take, and I can't speak for the rest of my investment team, but instead of going tops down and show this is the TAM that we're addressing, tell a story, right? Tell a story around, hey, this is one user or one client or one design partner that we've been talking to, and this is what we did for them, right? And you could start showcasing traction in that way and say, look, we've got 5 other conversations and we're in 5 different pilot programs with the similar types of customers or companies and so on and so forth. Related to this question, someone asked about LOIs. LOIs, sure, that's potentially indicator, but LOIs are, I'm not a lawyer, but I had our in-house legal counsel tell me this. LOIs are non-binding. So just because someone signed an LOI does not mean they're legally bound to go and purchase your solution. But it's a signal. I think we just have to think a little bit differently about how you show traction, not just your standard revenue up and to the right, number of contracts won. I think there's different ways to go about it.
Yeah. The only thing last thing I'll say is across all the companies that have helped start, the two that have worked, Optio that makes pitch decks, and these are not startups, okay? But Optio makes pitch decks. I also do websites as a service through a separate business. I sold product for both of those before I knew how to do them. I just said, I'll do it. And then I figured out how to do it. And then I did a lot. And then I raised my prices a lot. But either way, you can pre-sell stuff. If it's a hard enough problem, if people are unhappy enough, you can find somebody who wants to buy it from you.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about why now. So the crucial thing about why now is to establish that if you started this company in 6 months or in a year, it would be too late. And if you'd started this company 6 months or a year ago, it would have been too early. A lot of times right now, I'm just seeing people claim that AI is their why now. That's soft. AI can be your why now, but it can't be just AI. It needs to be something hyper specific within AI. So, for instance, I have a client who does some really interesting, very complex video gen infrastructure work. Models had dropped in the last few weeks that made his company suddenly hyper relevant. That was his why now. So it wasn't artificial intelligence, it was a hyper specific set of models that had just dropped based on a new breakthrough. That's the kind of thing that you want to look for. So let me talk about a why now slide. This is a why now for a very complicated, extraordinarily, this company was only possible because the government decided to change how they interpreted some regulatory docs. I mean, I can't, it was so, There are a lot of lawyers involved in the early cash of this business. Okay, very boring stuff. And so this is their regulatory framework discussion. Okay, it doesn't have an argument, it doesn't have a signpost, it has a weird, cheesy photo. At least he has the right number of fingers, but still, it's a really bad photo. It doesn't tell you anything. And then we have a long, very complex argument about how these things changed. This is how I rebuilt this slide. Why now? Recent regulatory rule changes made this possible. We also did, instead of explaining those things, we went and we found the actual PDFs and we pasted the actual PDFs onto the slide. You can argue with your lawyer's interpretation in 12 bullet points of how the regulation changed. You can't argue with the existence of PDFs. And so, as much as possible, you want to avoid an unnecessary argument. Now, eventually, as a part of any due diligence on this company, a serious investor would find a serious attorney to look at this. But what you don't want to do is make them think, gosh, I have to call my lawyer immediately. You want them to get them excited about the idea that suddenly something changed and now this is the moment to do this. So, what are some of those moments? It can be regulatory changes, it can be technology developments, so some subset within AI. It can be a change in culture. I helped a company that so non-alcoholic beverages are now becoming more of a thing. You can see a trend line. The best Why Now slides, I think, actually have two or three really dramatic trend lines that are all colliding into this new world. Maybe regulations changed, consumer behavior has changed, and technology has changed. And so suddenly something is possible that wasn't possible before. Okay. That is the reason there. And I've often seen if you don't have a good why now, it becomes incredibly hard to raise money because then investors think, ah, if if it was possible before, somebody would have already done it. Okay, AI alone is not the answer. And if your why now was true a year ago, think harder. Something needs to be extremely right now. Tony, does that align with your instincts, or am I getting too aggressive with it has to be true now and not a year ago?
Short answer, I agree with you. The longer answer is, look, AI has changed a lot in terms of technology and how products are built. It has exponentially sped up the creation of value, and you're going to be hard pressed to find any startup, at least even in our portfolio and those who apply, that does not have any sort of AI component in it these
Oh
days.
yeah.
So AI is not the why, it's the how. And yeah, I'd say even from a go-to-market side, because a big part of my role at Mucker is I've helped advise our portcos on messaging and go-to-market. I tell them, look, just by slapping AI in front of your messaging or on your website doesn't really mean anything. I did this 12 years ago when machine learning was the cool new thing, and we put machine learning all over the place and put it under the label of AI. Look, it doesn't stand out, right? Yeah, that's the my point of view.
Yeah, the other day I had a client edit a document to emphasize that their solution was cloud-based. And I was so confused. I was like, why are you? Of course it's cloud-based. Do you does anybody do on-prem that's not Cloudbot? What are you talking about? And I was like, oh, okay. What's actually happening is this guy is stuck in the 90s, or sorry, stuck in the early 2000s and hasn't realized we've already made that transition. So yeah, I feel like we're almost in that transition where it's almost implied. I did have a client, this was probably 2 years ago. He's a very successful venture capitalist who also is a founder of a massive AI company. But one of his companies is a venture-backed daycare center. They are growing at venture backable levels. It's remarkable. But venture-backed daycare center. And he called me back and said, there's no screens in this daycare center. That's part of their shtick. He calls me back and says, Matt, we need an AI slide. And I say, dude, you are an extremely serious AI guy and you understand what this business is. There's no way to have an AI slide. And he said, everybody's asking what our AI play is for the daycare. So I was like, okay, I'll make a fake AI slide. So I said something, I don't know. I completely made up a product idea and said, in the future, we'll do this. And it worked. They raised a bunch of money. But you do have to obviously talk about AI. But if AI, just generic AI is the answer, that's not the why now. It needs to be something more specific within AI. Okay, Last thing I'll talk about here, and then we'll have time for some questions. And even if anybody's very brave, they can even email me their deck and I can tear it apart live if we feel that as well. But is team. The more I've seen which companies raise and which companies don't raise, the more I realize that for pre-seed, for very early stage companies, this is the most important slide, the team. You're going to go through hell together as a team. And so you want to show that this is precisely the right group of people in the world to do this. This is a very talented team that I put together on this slide. They have good headshots. There's no excuse to have a bad headshot in the era of AI headshots. It shouldn't feel obviously AI, but you need to have a good headshot. Unless you're the CTO, in which case you can have a very bad neckbeard forward headshot. That's totally acceptable, but only for the CTO or hyper technical staff. One thing we're losing here is there's just a bunch of bullet points. You'll know how I feel about those. And we don't have much in the way of pictures. At least we do have pictures of the people. Actually, a remarkable thing about Theranos is their team slide had no pictures of humans on it. If you go to all the trouble of trying to cosplay as Steve Jobs, you should go ahead and get that black turtleneck picture on the team slide. I like to think that if Theranos had hired me, they would have committed fraud successfully for much longer. This is a much better version of this slide. Okay, what do we do here? Obviously, the design's better, but also we took a series of bullet points and boiled it down to the one reason you should care about this person. Okay, these people all have a really impressive resumes. They've done a bunch of things in the past. But what is the thing, the one thing that your audience will repeat to their co-investor, right? If you pitch to a venture capitalist, I want you to think about that venture capitalist going back to investment committee, IC, and saying, we got to back these guys. Malik launched and scaled Google Wallet. Kellen deployed $800 million into African fintech. Ayoka is a legendary founder, right? What is that one thing that they're going to repeat about you? And figure out what that one thing is that makes you the right person to do this. And you can just put that one thing. Otherwise, I like to put logos of recognizable past companies, logos with the right kind of educational background. That kind of thing is great. The other thing I really want to do here, okay, is you want to be precise. Okay, here what we said is 200. We got this number of 200 million. We got 3. We got 800 million. We have actual numbers on the slide. Those are quantifiable, provable, or disprovable metrics. If you say that you're a visionary leader with 20 years of experience, nobody cares. If you say you built something from 0 to 1 million users, people care, right? Because that's specific. And so I would look for specific things that validate your background, ideally that are quantifiable, that you can specifically say. If I was going to improve this slide, what would I do? One thing I'd do is I'd probably say if this was a huge company, I'd probably want to know how much it was worth. Co-founded an X billion-dollar startup. Okay, sadly, I don't have that background personally, but I can say specific things about my past that will make people take me seriously, more seriously or less seriously. Okay. Another thing I would do is I would put little LinkedIn logos on here so that people can click on them and it takes you directly to your LinkedIn page. Or if you're super crypto native, you can send them to X if that's your thing. But either way, people are going to dig deeper into you. If they're like, let's anticipate that and make that really easy for them. So
What if you're a tech role?
I love that. Yes,
Yeah.
that's perfect.
Oh,
But
sorry. Go ahead and wrap up because we do have several questions related to how to position a team slide. But yeah, go ahead and
perfect.
go through this.
Perfect. Okay. Final thoughts here. People invest in people. So ultimately, there's going to be some trust that needs to be established. This is part of the reason why getting warm intros is so valuable. You will need to establish people invest in people. Make sure that you look good on the team slide and that you position yourself. I once also had to tell a guy that he needed to update his team slide because I kid you not, when I met him, I thought I was in the wrong Zoom room. He had gained 200 pounds and lost all of his hair. And he was still using like the full hair skinny version of his headshot. I didn't recognize him. It was terrible. I felt so embarrassed, but I had to be like, hey man, we need to update this. 2, bullets over paragraphs. Okay, this is the only time I'm going to say bullet points are okay, is on your team slide. Although I think the best thing to do is to find the one great thing about each team member and put that on there. And then finally, be specific, be quantitative if possible. Show that you're the right person. Just because you had a fancy job title doesn't make me believe that you're good at this. The fact that you accomplished something impressive at that job tells me much more. Okay. Thank you guys so much. Let's talk about this and other areas. We have some team questions.
Yes. So if you don't mind going back to the team slide
Sure.
content, a few, I'll just quick fire. What are your thoughts about using avatars instead of actual headshots?
Think that's weird. That's my take.
Okay.
The time I think that really makes sense is you can tell I study pitch decks from all over the world. I'm a nerd about this. But the Bored Ape Yacht Club guys, they didn't list their name and they didn't have a picture. They had just their like crypto, they had their Bored Apes and they had like their X handles, and that was it. Now, that makes you super uncomfortable, but that makes sense for their weird world, okay? But also, at some point, there was a human docu-signing a document with their name on it, okay? So they're gonna want to know your name. An avatar is maybe okay if it's part of your whole shtick and it's this is part of our entire world that we're building. That's fine. If you're a video game company, sure. But if you're just building B2B SaaS and it's like a random, why are you hiding your face? I don't like it. I think it's strange.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have any recommendations if you are a solo founder for a team slide?
Great question. Solo founders are great and awesome. What I would do on that is I'd take half the slide and I would fill it with your face, and that gives you room to put a little bit more information about yourself. Again, be only say what matters, but you can say a little bit more than if you have a big team slide. But then you should have a group of advisors and allies. Okay. Advisors, you just ask people to be your advisor. You don't necessarily have to give them equity. If you know somebody, like if I was starting a startup, there are 10 guys I would call immediately and say, I'm starting this thing. I really want you to help me. I need your wisdom. You're so smart at all of these things. I have no specific ask for you right now, except do you mind if I list you as somebody, as an advisor? It's not a formal thing, but I can list you as advisor on my team slide. And I would get 10 people who are all super badass and I would list them all. The other thing I've seen in the past is somebody said they had a advisors and allies slide, which is even vaguer. What is an ally? And they basically just listed their like really cool badass friends on one slide and it had 20 people on it. But it was a bunch of like, you recognize half the names. You're like, these are super serious people. And you felt, oh, okay, this guy has massive social network value. I bet this guy can get to a great engineer, can get to a great whatever. And so social proof that you're not a weird, crazy person is valuable, but also you should get some people in your corner because you're going to need help.
Cool. Okay, one more question related to team slide, and I'll combine a couple of questions together. What would you do if some of the team members don't have that pedigree or background where prior companies aren't well recognized brands, or perhaps some of the founders did not go to college or university dropouts? What would you do for that?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's hard. I think that okay, I'm gonna be the jerk for a second. This is part of my job. Some people don't belong on the team slide, even if they belong on the team. Okay. I have some of my team members are amazing. They're incredibly good at what they do, but y'all wouldn't want to listen to them with their insights on pitch decks based on their backgrounds. Okay. So who shows up as a pretty face of the company? This guy. But who's actually making amazing slides? Those guys. Very proud of those people. I love them. I honor them. I pay them well. I take care of them. But if I was pitching my own company, they would not be on the slide, or they would just be ahead in a name as like our extended team members. Okay. Not everybody on the slide needs the same treatment. Okay. So I just made a pitch deck for there's a guy who started 3 unicorns. Okay. And he's starting something else. That guy is the only reason anybody's going to give them money. There's 10 other people on the team. That guy is getting his own slide and everybody else fits on one other slide, okay? Because nobody's betting on those other people. They're betting on the 3x unicorn founder, okay? That's the guy who gets the FaceTime. So part of that is, do they belong on the slide? If they're a co-founder, it'll be you need to put them on the slide. But if they're not a co-founder, do you want them to be your co-founder? Is a question. The other thing is, If you really believe they should be your co-founder, there's a reason you believe they should be your co-founder. What is that reason? And if that reason is they're a 10x engineer, great. Say 10x engineer with X number of GitHub, whatever, right? Find something that shows it and that's verifiable because there is some reason that you believe that person is the guy to do it, right? You've seen some actual behavior that they've done. There's something that tells you this person's amazing. And so if you don't have a reason to believe that this person's amazing that you can point to, they shouldn't be on your team. But it doesn't have to be that they worked at Google.
Yeah, I totally agree. Okay, we've got several people who are brave enough to volunteer for a live teardown.
Come
But before
on.
we jump into that, I do want to ask one last question from the audience here. The question is, what about financials and projections as a slide? We didn't cover that.
Ooh, okay, Tony, I want your feelings on this, but I think the amount of financials you need goes from back of the napkin math at pre-seed to full-blown DCF built by a banker at Series B. And there's a natural flow within here. But at pre-seed, every time I see a financial model, I roll my eyes. So that's my feelings. Tony, what do you
Yeah.
think?
Agree. And also in line with your overall approach to pitch deck, you don't need to copy and paste a spreadsheet sheet onto a slide because that defeats the purpose, right? And it's too much detail. I think if, in along the lines of the traction topic that we talked about, if you could highlight a couple of like key areas that shows that you've been gaining traction, whether it's if you have revenue or whatever, that's great. Part of this, I'll add one comment about this entire thing for pitch decks. The goal of a pitch deck is not to close. It's to get to a meeting, really, or get to the next meeting. And I even venture to say, if you have subsequent meetings with an investor, I would probably have a different version of a pitch deck than you would send to for an initial discussion. You haven't had an initial discussion yet. That's my personal take on it. But related to this question about finances and forecasts, at some point when you get some investors who are interested, you're going to have to put together a deal room of additional documents. This is where they do due diligence and put bank statements and other things like that. That's the time and place for that. For a pitch deck, if the goal, you keep in mind, if it's an initial pitch deck that you're sending out to investors, the goal is to get to a meeting, right? And investors, like Matt said, we get a ton of pitch decks every day, all the time. So how do you stand out? You're not going to be able to communicate a message effectively if it's a full slide of a massive spreadsheet. That's not going to get people's attention. Okay, cool. Matt, do you want to just pick one or two from the audience? They put it into the web chat or the webinar chat, some links to
Great.
their deck. So I think we have time for maybe one or two if you want to pull some up. And for those that
Yeah.
we won't get to, definitely send it to Matt because he's willing to give you guys some tips.
Yeah, one thing I'll say really quickly, and I'll just give some examples from these are redacted, protected pitch decks. But one thing I would consider doing is, for instance, you do need a how we plan to make money slide. And so this is, hey, we take 30% of revenue that goes through the platform. We take 20% of the revenue that comes through this platform. Okay, those are two platforms. And then this is another example. It's, hey, this is what has to be true for us to make money, right? This is not a financial model, but it is like how we make money and how that can get to be a really big number quite quickly. So that's an example of how you can do that.
Yeah.
But now let's go and look at the webinar chat. Let's see if I can. I'm not
There's
sure
a
if.
few. If you scroll to the bottom, people start to put in the links to your decks.
Right.
Yeah.
And then my email team is matt@optio.io. Okay, let's take a look at this. I've got one pulled up. Okay, connect rate. Thank you for being brave, guys. Okay, let's see what we can do here. ConnectRate.ai, the prospecting operating system for phone-first sellers that kills Sales Navigator. Okay, I like that we're killing things. I like that we're using plain, simple language. I do like on the cover slide, this is, what's that meme? You guys can tell I like memes. It's free real estate. The cover slide is free real estate. I'd like to show your UI or show your users or show something else here because it's free real estate. This is totally fine. This is a good cover slide. I think you can make it better by showing something interesting on it.
Hmm.
Okay. Drew. Oh, nice. Iron Man finisher. That's the right kind of random thing to add on here. I'm at only a half Iron Man finisher, Drew, but I love it. Okay, see, look, we got really provable numbers. I love that. That's great. I do want us to figure out how to actually get these logos, like the white version on black versus the black version on white, just because it'll look cleaner, right? It's worth spending a little bit of time. By the way, guys, it's worth spending $100 on some Upwork designer in the middle of nowhere to hit your deck with a pretty stick. Design actually is a signal. I wish it wasn't, but design is a signal of company quality. So it's worth spending a little bit of money on that. Okay, great. Okay, so I want a little bit of a signpost. So I know like if this is the problem slide. This is the problem slide because it's a good headline. Most of a rep's day is spent on two things, prospecting and dial tones. Great. Non-revenue generating, 75%. Activities that are not speaking or applying to customers. Average connect rate, 5%. Okay. So it sounds like they're wasting a lot of time. What I would say is I would change this to make that point really clear. I would say most of sales reps' day is wasted. And then this makes that point. Right now, we have a whole lot of numbers, okay? I'm getting distracted by all the numbers and trying to think about them and try to understand how that 25% fits into all of this and fits into that. And so a bunch of different numbers are floating around. And so I'm starting to get distracted because I'm trying to make the math work and understand all of this together. I think this is actually saying a couple different things. And so what I'd want to do is I'd probably show an SDR, I'd show a guy doing this job, and I would have a simple graph, and then I'd probably kill some of these numbers because you don't need all of them to be labeled. You only care about these two being labeled. And then you say most of an SDR's day is wasted. And then I might have just a tiny sliver that is actually talking to clients or something like that gets into this. So that's my initial instinct. I think we can clarify, we can strip a bunch of stuff out, we can make it simpler, and we can make the headline clearer, and we can add what do we call it? A signpost. Not only do reps spend 3 to 4 hours a day on prospecting, it's the hardest part of the job. Okay, always feed your deck to AI to just spell check for you. I have to think out loud about it is versus it's all the time, but that's going to be something that a surprising number of VCs are former English majors. I don't know why this happens, but a surprising number of them are, and they're going to roast you for that if they find it. 42% of salespeople rank prospect as the hardest part of their job ahead of closing deals and qualifying leads. Great. What I would do here is I would make a big pie chart or donut chart, and I'd say 42%, right? So this is nice to know. They spend a lot of time doing the hardest part of their job. So what I would do here is most of their day is wasted on prospecting. Then I'd say, and they hate it. So then we know they waste a lot of time. That costs money. They hate it. That causes churn. Okay, now I really get the problem. Current tools require rep work plus smarts to use. Okay, cool. So you have to actually be smart to use these things. That's good. Okay, this is a complicated slide. I don't mind that this is a complicated slide because the point is this is the broken status quo that presumably your app is going to mean that instead of going to all of these apps, you just use yours. And so I don't mind having a complicated status quo when that's the terrible existence that people suffer through today. And so presumably, okay, I'm waiting for the solution still. I was hoping that next slide was going to be the solution because I'm ready to get to it. Current startups are building a carriage with an engine, not a self-driving car. That is funny. Okay, that's a good point. This is pretty generic though, and so I want to go ahead and get to the answer. I've tried to make this slide a few times and it always ends up in the appendix because it never is worth its weight in the actual deck usually. Okay, ConnectRate.ai automates the entire prospecting workflow and leaves a rep what can't be automated, the cold call. Beautiful. This is a good slide. The only thing that I would consider doing with this slide is I might take this and split it out because like we can kill this slide or put in the appendix because it's good, but It's a more complicated argument. And then this doesn't feel, your argument is that we have simplicity, that we just take care of it. But the slide doesn't feel simple, right? We're trying to compare this broken status quo to this beautiful future, but this beautiful future doesn't feel that much simpler. So what I might do is just have these three things. These are the results, right? Instead of saying 20 to 35% connect rate, I would put 5 to 8x better connect rate, right? So 5 to X, 7X better connect rate, 2% or 20X faster list build time, 50% cost savings, half the price. Great. I'll just put those three big things and then show even just a mock-up of your software. So then it seems like simple, big results. And then the next slide can be here's how it actually works. Okay. And that can go from there. Okay, I think we're running up against time. And so, guys, if you will send me this, I know a lot of people send me their decks. I'd love for all of you to send me your decks. Me or my business partner, Nathan, are going to get back to you in the next couple of days with those ideas. And so I'd love to love to see those decks. If you've already shared them with me in this chat, please share them again just to make sure I capture them all. And so I'll drop my thing in the chat
You
for
mind
you.
pulling up the final slide of our main deck just because it has all the
Yes,
contact information? Great.
absolutely.
Um, Sure. Matt's pulling that up. First of all, thank you, Matt, for doing this. We've got a ton of questions that we didn't get to, unfortunately, but just because we've got a lot to cover. So, for those of you who do want to take advantage of Matt's time, his very generous offer to review your pitch decks that we didn't get to review, and even if you didn't want to have it in a live teardown, send an email to him. Oh, yep, right there,
Yep.
Matt at optio.io. And definitely, if you are a Mucker Portco, we could certainly help. And we have a relationship with Matt. And so we can also put you in contact to him, or you could reach out to him directly. So, either way, if you are interested in future sessions on any particular topic, shoot an email to Justin. Again, we got these planned out months in advance. If there's any other topic that you would like us to cover that helps founders build their startup at the earliest stages, let us know. And then lastly, if many of you are not a Mucker founder or a Mucker portfolio company, we can help not just put a check, but we do things like this in depth with partners like Matt, as well as we have in-house teams to help guide our founders. Go and apply, submit an application to our accelerator program, or if you just are looking to raise a seed or Series A or additional rounds of funding, just let us know. All right. Thank you all for joining us. We are up on time. Thanks again, Matt, for joining us again. Maybe we'll hit you up again next year or sometime later this year. It's always a
I
pleasure to
love
have
that.
you share your expertise. Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your day. Take care.
Thank you, Tony.